So we all know the importance of communication. In fact, it's key inside of an intimate relationship. And for many of us, myself included, it is not something that I was conditioned or taught how to communicate in a healthy way. So in my conversation today with Belinda Bailey, my love and relationships expert, we dove deep into what it looks like to be in healthy communication. Belinda teaches 4 pillars inside her Love Codes program, which I have done. And so today in our conversation, I was reminded of the things that I've forgotten that I needed to be reminded of, some of which are that as a man and a woman inside of a relationship, that we communicate differently. So men tend to internalize, to resolve, or to come up with solutions, whereas as women, we look to workshop and find the answers that way. The other thing was, which has been profound in my relationship, and I think is a beautiful thing to take away, is how can we attract our partners? How can we communicate and attract them as opposed to always being directive, which I know in my case and many women that I speak to, we tend to communicate in a very directive way. And if you've got 2 people inside a relationship that are in that directive relating and communication, it creates conflict. We talked about much more than that. I would invite you to continue tuning into the conversation and see what nuggets you can take away, because there's always so much from these conversations with Belle. So welcome back.
Thank you. Hello.
I love being in conversation about these sorts of topics because love and relationships are, as we've talked about, well, I consider that it's the most important thing, an intimate relationship, aside from obviously the relationship with self. So, and there's so many things that we could delve into right now, given where we are in the world, but something that I'm super passionate about, and I know it's a big part of the program that you run, Love Codes, which I've done, is communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, a lot of people say communication is key, right? And I happen to agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think everybody watching this right now, man or woman, if they've ever been in a relationship, has got to agree that one of the most challenging aspects of being in a relationship is communication. And when we are getting it right, just how much it positively impacts the relationship too.
But and you will go into it, what a skill, and not something that we're taught growing up.
Yeah.
What is healthy communication?
Absolutely. And, you know, I was thinking about it and what we're going to talk about. And there's so many different areas we could go into around communication. And certainly within my program, I talk about the 4 pillars of communication. And this is specifically as it pertains to a masculine and feminine relationship. And so within that, those 4 pillars, we have communication psychology, because they are different. Communication styles, because they also are different, and then something that I call needs versus neediness, because there is a whole communication package around that, and then the gap, which is what, you know, we talk about a lot in the training with me. And I think they're really important pillars to look at. And there's something outside of that too, which is just coming down to non-reactive communication as well, and that is something that we can practice at any time. And right up front, I think one of the really helpful things to say to people as a tool is, you know, when it comes to non-reactive communication, there's a whole body of work around non-violent communication. Have you heard of it before? And there's a great body of work around that I recommend for all people to read or to listen to, because that's a really good basis for healthy communication. But when it comes to, you know, masculine and feminine relationships, I do believe that there are those 4 pillars that are really really helpful, and if not understood, then detrimental to relationship.
So it's interesting you talk about non-violent communication, because a number of years ago I was recommended to buy, there's a very well-known book, a non-violent communication, and I never read it.
Oh, really?
Which is really interesting, because, you know, the communication is it's my thing.
Yeah.
It's the thing that I deeply love, care about, value, but I haven't read it. So for anyone listening, before we dive into the 4 pillars, can we just talk around, can you give us a bit of an overview of what that might look like?
Yeah. So for a lot of people, for those of you who just like to delve really deeply into things and go and look it up, those of you who are really new to conscious being a conscious human being and relating from that place, then it's also really great to look at. And for yourself, Lisa, it's, you know, it'd be a great tool for you to just know. However, probably you don't need to go and read that now. It's just a really great foundation for people who are starting out. But, you know, I don't want to oversimplify it because it is a whole topic in itself, but I think the most important aspect that you can take from non-violent communication is to always talk about yourself. And so this goes for men and women. It's really important that when we say how if our partner has done something or has not done something and it's caused us to feel a particular way, people will say, let me give you a real example. So let's say my partner didn't do the dishes. And when you're in lockdown isolation, not doing the dishes is a real pain in the ass, right? On a regular day, you might let it go. But let's say I come out and he hasn't done the dishes and that leaves more work for me to do. My schedule is already really full because I've got a little one and work and what have you. And I could say to him, you obviously are not respecting me. You don't give a shit. You haven't even helped out. And I'm really angry with you. You've really disrespected me. Now, I have just mind read all over the place. I've projected onto him what I feel and assumed that he doesn't care about me. But a very, very basic translation to that, and I would, you know, when working with people, when working in my program, I would go much deeper and take it to an even more neutral level. But as just the beginning basis, the best way to talk about that instead, because if you say that to somebody already, they're on the defense, right? Because you're attacking them. You did this and it means this and therefore you're this. Whereas what I could say otherwise is, oh man, I thought you were going to do the dishes and now I feel like I'm just the domestic slave. Now, see, I'm still upset. I'm still angry. We don't have to never be angry or upset, but I made it about me. Now he's in an empowered position to say, oh, well, I didn't realise that you were feeling that way, and then we can have an authentic and self-empowered conversation.
I'm just sitting here laughing because I was speaking to Laura, who I work with just before, sharing that I'd had a mini breakdown last night, the night of the eve of my birthday, and I'm like, oh, and it was all around this. I had literally, my partner had said something, I went to say, you did this, and then I remembered, and I feel sad. So I corrected myself, but I certainly fell into that. And he was on the defence saying, I didn't mean to, you know, and he was straight up. So I've had first-hand experience, but the power of actually taking it back and remembering that it's actually how I feel.
Yeah.
It's, and then it gives them an opportunity to go, well, of course I don't want you to feel that way, darling.
Precisely. So you're giving him an opportunity to step up and be the man you want him to be. It's phenomenal. And it sounds like something simple, but as you know, it's not, because it takes practice and guidance to keep getting back to it. I remember when we first started working on that kind of thing, you know, and then you'd come to me and we'd talk about something and you'd already learnt this and you knew it. And then I'd say something like, oh, is this what you said? And you'd go, oh my God, I can't believe I did it again. But now you've gotten, with practice, you've gotten to a place where you're either not doing it, or when you do it, you're able to bring yourself back. And I do see this with all of the women that I work with, and the results are really profound. It's something so simple and the results are really profound. And what starts to happen then is the men start to kind of fall in line and do the same thing without you having to tell them.
So why do we, how do we become that way where it is always about the other person? Is that just because of the way we're conditioned, or because it's that self-soothing when we're blaming somebody else? Like, well, what is that?
Well, let's go right to the core of it.
Yeah.
It's because we are reared in a world and a society that is unhealthy. I mean, that's at the crux of it. This is not a healthy world that we're living in psychologically, spiritually, emotionally. And because of that, we intrinsically feel unworthy. Now, there may be 0.05% of the people watching this actually do have an intrinsic sense of self-worth, but the majority of people who think they do, I would go and say, no, you don't, even if you think you do, because real self-worth comes down to feeling like you are worthy of receiving the divine, receiving God. And when you really do receive God, it's so overwhelming that you are brought to your knees in humility and gratitude. So most of us don't feel worthy. And because we don't feel worthy, we're walking around in our life with this constant voice inside our head saying, you're shit, you're no good, you don't deserve that, you're bad, so you're going to be punished. And even those of us who've done a lot of work, that voice has been there for thousands of years. So, it's been there for such a long time that it's there and it's unconscious. And because we've got that voice, you're no good, you're crap, you're no good, you're crap, then the very first trigger that happens outside of ourselves, anything that could make us feel that voice, we have to project it onto something else. We have to blame something else because we're so afraid of being wrong, of being bad, that we have to make it not us. We have to make it somebody else. And it's because we intrinsically don't feel worthy. When we know our worth and we walk around feeling completely worthy, now that doesn't mean we feel like we're perfect or that we're even deserving. It just means that we feel like we're worthy. Then when we have an emotional response to something, we don't have to blame anybody else because we don't feel like we're bad for having that response. We can just go, oh, I feel so awful. That feels crap. And we're able to have it. I do believe that whilst we're doing that deeper work of, rectifying our sense of self-worth and worthiness, which is essential to have a healthy life and healthy relationship, there are really practical tools and skills that we can learn to bring into our relationships in the meantime so that they can stay afloat and healthy.
And so that leads us into the 4 pillars that you teach within your love codes, which I got so much out of. And anyway, so let's start at the top.
Okay. Yeah. So as I said, there's 4 pillars, and I mean, we could spend an hour speaking of each pillar, but it would be great if we can get through a little bit of each. I'll give you the information that I can. I think the first one to start with is communication psychology. I think that's really important. And the reason for that is that men and women have a different psychology around communication. And the reason for that is that men and women have a different psychology for processing information. That's just how it is. Now, let's say men and women, okay, some men are different and they're all on the spectrum and what have you, but you know where I'm coming from with this. Generally, men process information internally. They're solution-oriented. So when they get a bunch of information, they work it out inside. They can take a really long time or they can take a short time, and then they spit out a solution. That's them in a nutshell. And as women, we're more externally or workshop oriented. So we process information by talking about it. I mean, you're nodding with a smile, right? It's like back and forth, back and forth. It doesn't matter. Like the destination for women's communication psychology is kind of irrelevant. It's the journey that's important. Whereas for men, it's about coming to the solution at the end. Now, we don't know that. We're not taught that. So when we go into a relationship with the opposite sex, as women, we will judge a man's communication, the way they communicate with us or what they say or don't say, based on our own internal filters, based on our feminine way of communicating. So let me give you an example. Let's say I said to you, let's say I rang you up and said, Lisa, I don't know what dress to wear, the pink, the orange, the red or the black. Now, we would talk about that for about an hour and you might in the end say, I think the pink one. And you've said, well, how do you feel in that one and where are you going and who's going to be, blah, 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 blah. And you say the pink one. I say, great. The next day I get up and I'm like, I want to wear the orange one. And then I show you face and go, you look great. And that's it. End of story. Now, if I said to my husband, which dress do you think I should wear? And he just goes, the pink one. Now, luckily for me, I've done a lot of this work, but if I hadn't have done a lot of this work, I'm going to be thinking, oh, you obviously don't care enough to give me enough time to talk about this. This isn't important to you. You're not taking this seriously. And then I go off and I'm a bit upset and shitty. Then the next day I get up and I go to get dressed and I remember he said the pink one, but I'm trying things on and today I feel like orange. So I wear orange and I come out and he says nothing. But what happens to him internally is that he feels like he got it wrong. And we've got to remember that men need to be the hero. Men actually need to be the saviour. And this is not just some egotistical thing. This is part of the way a male's brain psychologically advances through life. And if you want to look into that even more deeply, the best person, I believe, is Stephen Badulf. If you look at his work, he'll explain it and you know his work. And So that's actually necessary for a man. So if he gives you advice or an outcome and you don't take it, he gets the message, well, I was wrong, therefore I failed. So where does this leave us? First of all, as a woman, when a man just gives you a straight out answer, don't judge that based on what that would mean if your girlfriend did that. For instance, if I said to you, Lisa, which dress, and you just went, oh, the pink one. Well, you clearly don't give much of a shit, do you? Because if you did, you would talk about it. And that would be my thought, is that you don't really care enough to really delve too deep into it. That's what I would think. It's not important to you. And probably I'd be right, you know. It's not high on your priority list of meaningful things. Whereas if a man gives me that response, it doesn't mean that. So first thing, don't judge a man's response based on your own internal processing. He is different to us. The way he communicates is different. The way he processes is different. The next thing is, if he gives you a response, if he doesn't respond to you straight away, it takes a really long time to get back to you. Often we can feel like, he's ignoring me, it's not important to him, he doesn't care, he's forgotten about it. And because we think that and we're women, we generally then jump in and go, well, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? Now, some men, because they're processing internally, right? I love it how you're just nodding. Well, they actually, a lot of the time, they're processing the same information that we would. Now, some of them do it really quickly, but often it takes them a long time. And I know you've done this, Lisa, because we've talked about this, where you say, okay, don't say anything, leave it. He might come back to you in an hour. He might come back to you in a day. But if he does that, it's not because it's not important, which is what it would mean to us if our girlfriend didn't respond straight away. It's because it's so important to him to give you a good solution that he wants to really take the time, right?
I'm laughing because I don't want to be horrible, but I'm a slow learner. It's like, I'm doing this again because he does. He doesn't. It is so, like, I'm actually seeing this play out in my relationship. Absolutely internalizes, looking for the solution, wants to be the hero, is, you know, yeah, absolutely. And when he gives me something like what to wear and I do that, I can see the joy on his face, but he takes time, and I want answers.
Yeah. So what you can do.
So this is, there've been plenty of people, I'm sure, that watch this that relate to this. Yeah. Come on, you know, especially when you're, I don't know, you want an answer.
So what we need to do, and this will just be a reminder for you, what we need to do is remember, is decide, okay, what's important here. Is it, developing our connection and relationship, or me getting the responses that I want? And if it's getting the responses that you want, then go and talk to a girlfriend. If you want to workshop about things, go and talk to a girlfriend. Don't ask him. It's not his place. And because we're in isolation in Melbourne or in lockdown, that's hard. You need to remember, call your girlfriend. We have to do that. It makes such a difference because and, one of the pillars is the gap, and you'll remember that. And that's something I think that will really help you. So when we get to that, let's just connect this back, leaving a gap. But, because he wants to be your hero, and you said he lights up, right? So when you do take his advice, he lights up. So that's the other thing that we need to be really careful of is don't ask for his opinion if you need to workshop. And in your case, he's a slow processor, so don't ask if you need a response immediately. The other thing is, don't ask his advice, and this is most important, don't ask his advice unless you're willing to take it.
And this is a great one, because what I've learned, and I don't know if you shared this with me, but he doesn't give advice, but he likes to be involved in certain things. And so what I've now done, because I remember this, is that if he wants to share something with me, I'll say, hey, darling, I'm really happy to share, but that won't necessarily mean that I'm going to take your advice, and that, please don't take it personally. So then that frames it and gives him it shows him beforehand that I'm not like, okay, tell me what to do and I'm going to do it.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. And the other distinction there is that you haven't gone to him asking for advice. He just wants to talk about it, and so that is a distinction. And they take that as a distinction as well. And so, yes, right. If he wants to start talking, that's great. Pre-frame it and remind them that I really want to listen to you, but I'm not necessarily looking for advice right now.
Yeah.
Make sure, though, that you do ask for his advice at times and set yourself up to win, the both of you. So find times when you can ask his advice on something that you know for sure. So for instance, that you will take. So for instance, let's say you're going to go, a real example was not too long ago, Warwick and I had to buy a new couch. Now, sometimes, he doesn't really care, but sometimes he does. And something like a couch, we're going to be both using. So I needed to have his input, but I made sure that I went and looked at all the couches and I narrowed it down to 2. And if he didn't like either of them and wanted to look at others, he's welcome to go and do the research, and that would depend on how much it matters to him. But as it stands, he was happy with the 2 options and he chose one. But I didn't show him any options until I got it down to 2, and I could have been 3 or 4, but I found 2 that I was willing to take either one of those. So I could give him that and say, these are the 2 that I like. Which one do you think we should get? And I was willing to take his advice on either of them because I liked them both. So asking his advice when you're willing to take it sets you up to win because A, you get his advice and you genuinely want it, but B, he then gets the message that he got it right. What that means is next time when you have some advice or you want his input, he's going to be more inclined to get on board. I know a lot of women watching this will know that in the beginning their partners were really interested and they gave advice and they gave input, and now they just don't care, seemingly. That would most likely, I've seen this happen a lot, and it's often because you've stopped taking their advice, you've over-asked, you ask them about every little thing, and you stop saying, you stop taking their advice because it's not always right, and then they feel like they're always getting it wrong. I can't win with you, so they stop giving advice altogether. The good news is you can turn that back.
That's really important because that actually is what happened in my marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was. So I think that's a really good also point to make, that it can be turned around. Like with anything, it takes work, but anything can be changed, anything can be transformed if we want something enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this work has been applied to loads of women who are already in relationships that have not working, and applying these tools does turn the relationship around a lot of the time. And it can be applied at any point in relationship.
And this first one is it's really quite simple. It's very clear, and there's really is a way to develop it. Yeah. And you've just shared that. So thank you for that reminder, and I'm sure for those listening, they've got a lot from that. So the second one.
So the second one is communication styles. Now that is, I think we can go briefly over this, but it's important. But let's just say that there's 2 different styles of communicating. There's directive communication or attractive communication. And I use the terminology directive and attractive instead of masculine and feminine because we can embody either one of them at different times. When we're coming into what we want to be a polarized relationship, meaning that either one of us is on the other end of the pole, so there's always attraction and magnetism, then we need to be communicating in an attractive, one person needs to be communicating in an attractive way and the other in a directive way. And directive communication, I think it's kind of self-explanatory. It's when you say, do it, and do it like this. This is the kind of communication we need to embody if we're directing something, if we're, at work, or if we're trying to get things done, or, we're heading a project or something like that. Creative communication can be a little more elusive in its description to people, but I like to describe it as that attractive communication means creating a space that is attractive, that people are drawn to. So attractive doesn't mean being all pretty. It means creating a space in the way that we communicate that compels people to inquire and step forward. And that doesn't mean making it nice and happy either. It really means being authentic. We're drawn to things and people when they talk about how they feel, when they're in their feeling self. This makes me feel sad, or I'm enjoying this, or this makes me want to open up. Really being in that feeling space about what we desire and how we feel. That is an attractive way to communicate. Now, what happens for people, when one person is in one pole, the other person will either be in the same pole, so the attractive or directive, and that will cause conflict, or they could be in the opposite poles and that creates attraction. So if we're in, or you can flip poles. So if as a woman we're in directive communication, the man will either be in directive communication, will be at like loggerheads, or he'll be flipped and go into attractive communication. And that's when men start to be all like, oh, I feel like this. And I know we want men to be in touch with their feelings, but when they start talking in that attractive communication, what do we think? We're like, oh, my God.
Step up, be a man.
Yeah, be a man. Yeah, harden up. You know? And it's awful that we say that in some ways, but it's just the reality of those poles. So as women, we want to be able to embody our attractive communication. And that means, similar to the nonviolent communication, talking about me, but talking about how I feel rather than telling them what to do, and then allowing him the opportunity to choose what to do in response to that.
This one for me has been super powerful, super powerful. And I think for a lot of women I know, and I'm sure a lot of women that will be watching, we are in our, I want to call it masculine, but directive. And as mothers, I almost want to say even more so. So I saw what happened for my ex-husband it was difficult. I was so directive that there was the conflict, and I'm sure that there will be a lot of people, both men and women, that watch this that can relate to this and see just what is how that's impacting their relationship when you're both communicating in the same style.
Absolutely. And, we need to give ourselves a break, and we need to give the women in our lives a break when we're learning this, because the reason we're in our directive communication is because it's the only option we've been given. So, let's say up until the sexual revolution, since the sexual revolution, we're in a masculine-dominated world where if we wanted to be in a powerful position as women, we want to do things and be taken seriously, we realised that we decided we needed to be in our directive masculine way because to be taken seriously, and that all makes a lot of sense. But the truth is that that's not the only way. When we can be in our empowered feminine way of being and our empowered attractive way of being, then we will be taken seriously and we're incredibly powerful. The problem is that before the sexual revolution, the feminine way of being was so subjugated that it wasn't powerful. Being in the powerful feminine doesn't mean just, doing whatever your man says. It means stepping into your creative and attractive way of being, but it means things like only asking for advice when you're ready to take it. So therefore it is like we're doing what they tell us to do, but only when we want to, so we haven't had a positive or empowered model of being in that feminine polarity. We just haven't. We're starting to develop that now. So when we keep forgetting it, that's okay. We need to learn, but we need to take this seriously and set ourselves up to learn these skills. And I mean, you need to be held accountable. You need to have a process that you're stepping by. You can't just go, okay, I'm going to do that now. We're retraining ourselves to do something that we haven't done for thousands of years.
And I think the thing that I find really interesting and something that I want people to really understand in watching this is that attractive is not the soft, what I thought was weak. And I think a lot of people think that it's that it's just sort of that, that the masculine is sort of on a pedestal, and it's like we become this sort of meek, mild. It's not that. It's being in our attractive communication is not that at all.
Not at all. Let's understand attractive. What the word attractive means is that it compels you toward it. It attracts you toward it. And what attracts a human being to something is authenticity of their inner world.
Yeah.
Now, this is in any arena. I remember when I was really young, I studied method acting, like full-time for a long time. I was right in there drinking my coffee. I hated coffee, but everyone drank it. So drinking coffee and smoking Peter Stuyvesant's, because that's what you do, right? It was funny. I lied about my age to get into the course because I was too young. And we'd sit around being all, being actors. What I discovered from that, and anyone who's looked into method acting will know, we used to do scenes, and we'd stand up on the stage and you'd read the scene, you'd have all the props, you'd do all the things, and you'd watch and you'd kind of go, meh. And then they'd strip it back and you'd be allowed to have just your cup of coffee, and you'd sit there and you'd just do the scene, and you'd maybe say 4 or 5 words, but you pretend nobody was there. This is the directive. You would pretend nobody was there, and you just let yourself have all the feelings around the thoughts that they told you. So you're having thoughts and you might say 3 or 4 words. Watching somebody do that was so compelling. You're like this, glued to watching them, because they were having an authentic experience. And that is attractive communication. Being connected to your authentic internal experience and either speaking or not speaking from that space, your man will be, oh, what can I do for you? How are you feeling? Why are you feeling that way? It's true, isn't it, Lisa? You've had the experience yourself, yeah. I'm really loving but cultivating this way of communication, and I feel so much more connected. Yeah. So much more connected, because I'm very much speaking from that feeling place, which was really foreign to me, and I think is foreign to a lot of people, like talking from the feeling space, and it really certainly is very much more attractive because I can feel that. Yeah, and what we need to be careful of when people start to think of speaking from that feeling place is it's not about being overindulgent, right? It's not about, drowning in our emotions. It's just about recognising a feeling, allowing it to be there, setting the stage. Awesome. So the third pillar is? So the third pillar, I want to make sure that we get to leaving a gap, but let's talk about needs versus neediness. And this was a big part of the program actually with you, Lisa. Do you remember this one? Oh, yeah. I had a real thing around being, and I think that there'll be a lot of people, again, that relate to this, that desire not to be needy, because I equated being needy to weak because of... And there will be, you are not alone. There's the reason these are the 4 pillars, because out of all the hundreds of women that I've worked with, these are the 4 things that are present in the majority and always make the difference. And we're told not to be needy. Don't be needy. Oh, she's so needy. All this negative talk around being needy. But then in the next breath, we're told you need to make sure your needs are being met. So it's a bit confusing, right? So we want to give a real distinction that you don't want to be needy. Being needy is draining on the other person, and it's draining on ourselves. But having needs is empowering. Now, the difference is quite big, actually. And when we get this difference, and I know a lot of people watching this will be having this experience, and we get the difference, it's a real aha moment because it changes everything. So if we go to, let's say my relationship, I have a need. Let's say my need is physical affection. Now, I know I need physical affection. That's important to me. If I say that that's a need, not a want, but a need, I need to know that I'm willing, therefore, to leave the relationship if that need can't be met. So this is the first place where we fall down. A lot of us think that our needs are, well, I need to see them 3 times a week, and I need them to have, their own house, and that's fine if they're your needs, but you need to sit down first. We all need to sit down first and get very, very clear, specific about what our needs are and the difference between needs and wants. Now, needs in a relationship are things that if you don't have them, you cannot stay. Okay. Yeah. This was big now that I'm remembering going through this process. It was really an interesting process, because I remember we had to write our needs down and then come back to you, and really and for a lot of us it was a need to feel safe. Yep. Yeah, that's right. Well done. Yeah, and it is often. Do you remember, though, a lot of the girls I remember in your group, well, some of them had things like, I need to see them as many times a week, I need to live this close and stuff, and then we came back, I'm like, great, now, of all of those, if they don't meet all of those, you're willing to leave a relationship even though it's good on every other level. They're like, oh, no. So they're wants. And the need to feel safe, that is for sure a need. Especially for some people, it doesn't come up because they feel intrinsically safe, but a lot of us don't. So that's the first thing. You got to understand what your needs are, and you probably will have 2 or 3, not 6 or 7.
But I think it's a really great it's a really great pillar to look at, because when we know what we are willing to walk away from, we have the clarity is there. Like when we're clear on our needs, where we know that those needs, it's a no, it's a yes or a no, and there's no negotiation. And
that's why it's not needy. So, you know, when we step over to the dark side, to the needy side, how that would present, and I think it's having an example is the best way to understand this. So, for instance, if I was to say I'm in a relationship with my partner and I felt like I wasn't getting enough physical affection, and let's say that's a genuine need, okay, for me. Let's say that's a genuine need. And if I were to come to him and say, well, you know, look, I need you to give me more physical affection because I'm not happy the way that it is. I need you to touch me more. I need you to touch me more when we're out in public. I need. I mean, first of all, he hears, I'm being bad and doing wrong. But the other thing is, you are being needy, because what you're setting up is I'm in a situation where I need something from someone outside of myself, and therefore I'm trapped. And that does feel scary, and we do get needy because I am trapped, because here I am in this relationship. I'm not happy unless I get more physical affection, so I need this man to give it to me. This is disempowering to us, and it's needy for us, and they feel that neediness as well. Now, that same need, that same experience turned into an empowered need would look like this, look like me knowing that this is a need of mine, which means I know I'm willing to leave this relationship for this. Taking that need to the man in front of me and saying, you know, I love you and I need more physical affection in relationship to feel totally satisfied. Full stop. You're not telling I need you to do it. You're keeping it about me. That is empowered. And I feel so powerful saying that, because I am saying this is what I need and that's my boundary. And I love and respect you enough to take that information and process it for yourself to see what you are capable and willing to come back to me with. Now, he may come back to you and say nothing at all, and that's your answer. He may come back to you and say, well, it's not that important to me. That's your answer. Or he may come back to you, and this is almost always what happens. He may come back to you and say, well, I'd like to give you more of that, but this stops me. Or I'd like to give you more of that. How can I do that? He will come back, and then you know that you're in a relationship where you can communicate well, you can ask for your needs, you can speak about it in a respectful way, and you can build together. And you know that he is choosing to provide that for you, rather than you going, I need you to be more than. It doesn't feel good for anyone.
No. And it's so powerful. It's so clear, and it's not a lot of words is what I'm loving. It's so, I'm very wordy.
Well, you know, I think that's really good to bring up just briefly, because as we spoke about before, men are internal processors, right? So they don't use a lot outwardly, and we do. And that's okay. And it's not all up to us, you know, to do everything to make it easier for them. But if you can do things to make it easier for them, then you're going to have an easier time of it yourself. So remembering that is helpful. Using less words, because they get overwhelmed.
Yep. I see it. All my stuff is coming out in this conversation. It's great. I have no qualms. So the last pillar, which is a really great one too, the gap.
Yeah, it's a biggie, isn't it? Again, it's not that complicated. Most of these pillars are pretty simple. The first one might be a little more complicated, but they're pretty simple. But it takes practice and being held accountable to change the pattern. But also I want to just briefly say, and you'll attest to this, Lisa, is that even though it takes practice, when you start doing it, it actually feels more natural, doesn't it? Like
it's like it gives you what you've been seeking. Like I know when I had a session with you with my partner, it was like when you use these forms of communication, it brings you into what I want, which is deep connection. So it's like, Of course you're going to continue doing what you're offering, what you teach, because it works, but it's doing all the things that I've wanted it to do in relationship.
And that's because this way of speaking actually is your natural and innate way to communicate as a woman, but you've been trained out of it. And so it's just a period of retraining self to come back into that natural, for it to be okay, for it to be allowed. The last pillar is the leaving of a gap. Now, I like to say, just to sum this up, I like to say what you're feeling and then leave a gap, stick some masking tape on your mouth. So, and literally, I must say, actually, that the masking tape bit came from a friend of mine, Russ Price, many years ago when I was developing this work, and he was saying, I call that the masking tape moment. It's like you've got to put, you got to imagine doing that because it's so easy to want to fill in the gap. Now, what this kind of pertains to is when we know we need to tell a man how we feel or what we need. That's a really good example, is something that we need. Anything that, or even asking his advice on something or his opinion on something, when we come to a man with anything that we're wanting a response to, what we tend to do as women is we'll put it out there, we'll wait for a second for him to respond, and before he has an opportunity to respond, we start to fill up that space. We fill it up with possibilities of what he might like to say. We fill it up with over-explaining why we feel that way. We've just filled that space up. The reason we do that is, A, because we're external processors, but mostly it's because we're so afraid of what his response is going to be, or that he's not going to give us one at all, that we want to fill it up and give him lots of opportunities and options because we don't want to see that his response is going to be something we don't like. We're so scared it's going to be something we don't like, so we just fill that gap up.
I don't remember hearing this because I feel like I'm hearing this for the first time. Isn't it interesting, when you hear something a second or a third time, you pick up new bits of gold. But that is really interesting that it's born out of a fear of them not responding the way you want them to respond. It's really interesting.
Because what does it mean to us? If he doesn't respond in the way I need him to, ultimately it means that I should leave this relationship. And most of us women don't want to see that. A lot of unhealthy relationships are because women are avoiding seeing what's really true for them.
That was stop. Sorry to say, but that.
No,
that's
it's good.
I think, that's a big one.
It is.
And that's a perfect example of avoiding what you don't want to see by filling the space up so that you don't see what you might know deep down is there, but you're just not willing to see. Because once you see, for many of us, once you see, you can't do anything but act upon it.
And here's the really cool thing. I've been in that situation myself, as have many women I've worked with. I remember my first marriage, we weren't married yet, we were a lot younger, and having that moment of recognising that I was avoiding that and saying to myself, okay, well, I can either keep going down this track and because the relationship was good at the time in many ways, but I knew I was avoiding something, and I had a moment of reckoning with myself where I faced my fear. I said, okay, well, here's the thing. Either I keep avoiding it and go on into a relationship that's almost awesome, or I face this fear in the face, look at it in the face, and I will either see that this relationship needs to end or something else will happen. And I faced it and I said it and I spoke it and I let it be. And what happened, this was my first experience of this, what happened for me was he stepped up. The communication occurred, the real communication occurred, and he showed me that not only was he able to see what I was experiencing, but he was able to make some shifts and support the process. So what happened is our relationship completely transformed and blossomed into the next phase. Now, I've now used this work with a lot of women, and I use this all the time in my current relationship. all the time. There are often moments that occur where I feel like I'm avoiding something and then I go into it instead, knowing that it could mean the end of the relationship, because it gets to that point, you know, where it's that important. And every time I am so blown away at what comes out instead. It's always, so far, been a blossoming into a new level of love, a new level of connection, a new level of companionship. So by us filling that gap, we do it because we're afraid to see something we don't want to see. But what we're actually doing by filling that gap is we are disabling ourselves from ever having full and true confirmation that where we are is where we need to be. So we will constantly be running away from those shadows in the back of our mind of, is this relationship or is this situation good for me or not? When instead we leave a gap, we put ourselves into the unknown, which is scary and empowering, and we will get a response that will be a clear indicator of moving forward or not. And either way, we will then be in the authentic right place to be.
To do this work, it takes courage. Masses. That's what was reminded with as I was listening to you, because there are a lot of people that, and there's no judgment at all. There is no judgment. Everyone's in there where they're meant to be, but it takes massive amount of courage to actually see things as they are.
100%. And that's why, you know, as you know, I don't take just anyone into my courses. You have to have done a lot of work, and the love codes and the work that I teach is how to have your relationship as a crucible for evolutionary change. You know, this is about, you don't do this unless you are 100% up for evolving.
Which will be our next conversation. It will definitely be our next conversation because it feels right, and it is, you know, they say I read something somewhere where they said if you're on this path of, you know, of evolution, then you do need to be inside of a relationship, because that's where the evolution occurs, when you're inside of an intimate relationship. Would you agree with that?
Not entirely, no. I don't think that there could be any general rule to, you know, a human soul's evolution.
True.
I mean, if you look at people like Yogananda and Babaji, you know, these people are basically completely aware of their God self. So, you know, that renunciate yogi path is one way, but certainly what they say in the Vedas or in the yogic philosophy is that the path of the householder is another way, which basically means being in a relationship. Certainly being in a relationship is like, I do believe that it is probably a harder and more razor edge, and therefore potentially even a faster path, being in a relationship, because you just got so much more kind of fodder to work with, so many more triggers and you know, reflections. But yeah, I think that there's many paths that lead to Rome.
Do you know what? Now, as I'm listening to you, I'm wondering, did I seek that out because then that would affirm my path that I've taken? And it sounds justifying, oh, yes, I'm in a relationship and I'm choosing a relationship. I know that being in a relationship, as you've just said, there are so many triggers, there's so many opportunities for growth, for overcoming myself, for me to experience more and more feel a feeling of worthiness. And so, yeah, it's the path that I've chosen, and I know that's, I'm not here to evolve on my own. But I totally respect, and I agree actually what you said, but I think I was seeking a justification of my path.
Well, look, certainly, I mean, the reason I do the work I do in relationships is because I was given, you know, an insight or a wisdom some time ago about how to help the world to evolve in a more quickly. That's one way I can do it, because relationships, most people are in them or want to be in them. If all the relationships in the world were actually healthy and evolutionary, then the amount of love and frequency of love that we would be able to extend would just be multiplied so much more quickly. So I do think that there is something to that about having healthy relationships, because, the energy or the frequency of me being in love on my own is one thing. Now, if I can do that with another being, that's just going to be magnified. And then the children that come into that. So there is something to be said for that.
And the contribution of the household to raising the frequency of the planet.
We're all little mini worlds, aren't we? We're
totally.
like little mini galaxies. So if we can create more love, then absolutely. And again, I think it's really important to make the distinction that anyone who's watching this work that I'm talking about and that I'm doing with people, it really is for people who want to evolve. This isn't just about how to have a nice relationship. It's about how to have an evolutionary relationship that's healthy and fun as well.
I think that's very important, because the work that you do does require you to make that conscious choice that you want that inside of a relationship, because it's daily, it's moment by moment, it's remembering, it's remembering that you are two souls on a journey together, contributing to each other, but really contributing to the planet. So
100%. Yeah. And, and also just a reminder that when we do these things, though, the feedback that we get inside the relationship is more laughter, more fun, more lightness, more love, more connection.
More intimacy.
More intimacy. It really is, being evolutionary, like evolving ourselves, there's hard work involved, but the payback is just more fun. Life is fun. We get to be the fool.
Well, I've had first-hand experience. I've worked with you, as I've shared, for it's actually all coming up to 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, coming up to 2 years. And so working with you personally, just one-on-one, but also doing love codes. And I love these conversations, and anytime we do, because it's a reminder of the work that I continue to do, but also the things that I might have forgotten about, because I'm a human, and we all forget these things and need to be reminded to come back in. But they're powerful practices, and I know that who I am inside of this current relationship is very different to the woman I was inside of my marriage, who really was very directive, never left a gap, wasn't empowering. Really wasn't empowering, because I would get so much advice and not take it. So all the things, it was very unhealthy how I was inside of that relationship. So if my ex-husband ever happens to watch this, I'm publicly apologising. I have apologised. Oh, goodness, it's a journey, isn't it?
Oh, it really is. And I think, what the sentiment that you're sharing, I get from a lot of women who come to me after their marriages have ended, and a lot of us, myself included, we'll have a moment of looking back and going, oh, if I had known this back then, might it have been different? And the answer is yes, it would have been different. Does it matter? No, because that's the journey. But yes, and that's why, I really urge women who are in marriages or in relationships and they're really struggling, do the work, do it now, because either it'll transform the relationship that you're in, or it will gracefully guide you out, and then you will be in the right space to start a new relationship with the right tools.
I love that. That's a beautiful place to end, really, because it's for everyone. I love this conversation, because I love talking about communication, and it really is key. It really is key. So next conversation we are going to talk about, would you like to share again? So for anyone watching, they'll know what our next...
Sure. Yeah. So we'll talk about how to have a relationship as a crucible for evolutionary change.
Wow. That's going to be juicy. So for anyone watching, and if they want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to connect at the moment?
Well, you can always go to my Facebook page, which is, I think, Juicy Relating. I don't even remember. My website, belindabailey.com. But also I have a membership program, and I think that's probably a great place for people to come to at the moment. It's monthly. It's super, super cheap. And maybe we can work out some sort of discount or some sort of special for your viewers as well. And that's really great for people who've done some of my work or read some of my things or have done the first audio training, or if you're new to it. But like you said yourself, Lisa, you're forgetting some things, or no one's going to remember it all after one time, after one program. It's a lot of information. So that's why we've designed this monthly live Zoom calls. And it's going to be amazing, because what you can do is you can send me questions prior to, if you want to keep it anonymous, or even on the call you can ask questions live, and I will answer people's very specific questions. Some people don't like to share who it is, so you can send it anonymously, and I will delve really deeply into one aspect of each part of my work in each call. So it'll be really deep. So I'm sure we'll be able to share a link to that.
I'm going to be on those calls.
Yeah, I hope so.
I'm signed up. You can never learn. You can never stop learning in this space. So, like with all of these areas that I'm interested in, it's constant, isn't it?
Oh, it never ends. It's because once you get to one level, there's another level, another.
And it's deeply fulfilling, because each time you learn something new about it and you bring it into your relationship, it does up-level it.
100%.
Thank you, as always, beautiful.
Thank you, darling.
And happy birthday for tomorrow.
And happy birthday for today.
What a way to spend my birthday, in conversation about communication and relationships.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Belinda and I would encourage you to try on even one of those pillars that Belinda mentioned, because I would go as far as saying that if you did, that your relationship could be transformed in quite miraculous and magical ways. If you'd like to stay tuned in to future conversations, please press subscribe, and you can also press the bell button, which will keep you notified of future episodes. Until next time, so much love.